I believe that the single biggest question facing British politics today is, who is Keir Starmer? Is he, as many of his critics argue, effectively a hollow man, an empty vessel, a kind of puppet manipulated by shadowy forces from outside? Or does he have a core of central political beliefs and understanding of his own? And if so, what is it? On cue comes the first serious biography of Keir Starmer by somebody who knows him pretty well, the former Labour communications chief, a guy very, very close to Ed Miliband, former Times journalist, Tom Baldwin, someone I've known for 20 years. And the genesis of this book is important because originally Keir Starmer was going to write his own autobiography, kind of memoir, and explain to people who he was. And people around him had said, Keir, it's really important that the British public gets to know you. And of course, it is particularly important in this case because Starmer is not a naturally self-reflective or exhibitionist man. You know, he has that kind of steely hair pushed back, the furrowed brow, the kind of perpetually slightly anxious, pained expression. He's not somebody who likes talking about himself or his background or his family. And he's reduced those things to a series of now kind of cliched stories about the pebble-dashed house he grew up in and his toolmaker father. And we've all got rather bored of those. But in the modern world, we do have to understand who our leaders are. And Starmer does have to do more of this. And this book was originally going to be, as I say, an autobiography and his way of doing it. But he realized quite quickly it was going to take too much time. It was a bit painful. It was getting in the way of the job of actually leading the Labour Party. And so he passed it over to Tom Baldwin. This is not, therefore, an authorised biography in the sense that Starmer gave Baldwin absolute access to all his friends, all his family, all his papers, though a bit of that, but it is definitely a friendly biography. I would say this is Keir Starmer, the case for the defence. And it's a pretty impressive case, I think. I'm going to pick out some of the themes from the book that go some way to explaining who Keir Starmer is politically. The early years were indeed very, very tough. He's one of 4 children, brought up in a working-class family where there was never enough money and where his mother was really seriously ill with Still's disease, horrible disease that involves periods in hospital, never being there completely reliably because she was always very ill, the emotional centre of the family, but physically very, very damaged. His father, with whom he clearly had quite a chilly relationship, they weren't warm. He says his father never hugged him once, was a toolmaker, worked in a factory originally, and then had his own little toolmaking business in the village they grew up in. Of the 4 siblings, Starmer's the oldest. He is the only one who made it out through ferocious hard work to a white-collar job. He's the only one who became properly middle class. His 3 siblings, his 2 sisters and his brother, never, as it were, made it out of the working class. And I think this is really important. This shows why Starmer is so different, for instance, from Tony Blair, to whom he is sometimes compared. Because Tony Blair came from an affluent, upper-middle class family, supremely self-confident people, and he is himself. Keir Starmer comes from that part of the UK society which has got chips on the shoulders, which looks up, particularly his toolmaker father, and feels that people are sneering at them, looking down on them, supercilious, never giving them the proper respect that every human being deserves. And I think that is part of the core of his politics. This is a politician who comes from a class-based view of politics. Then, of course, he goes into the law, and he has progressive views. And in many ways, the law is a fascinating period for him because it's most of his career, for a start. You can go into the law in this country, particularly if you're very bright like Starmer, and make unbelievable amounts of money. Not easily, but by working hard, you can become very rich quite fast. And Starmer turns his back on that kind of legal practice in favour of human rights law, which at the time he picked it up was quite unfashionable and quite unusual.
I do think it's time that the court system became much more of a place where the ordinary person feels they can go.
And again, particularly as a young barrister, he picks up cases where there isn't much money involved, where he's not being properly paid, but there is some strong social content to it. He was famously involved in the McLibel trial, where 2 vegan anarchists were being pursued by McDonald's for what they'd said about the way they produced food.
Multinationals such as McDonald's didn't ought to be able to sue for libel in this day and age.
He worked for factory workers in a paper factory in Essex who had been injured again and again. He's picked up trade union cases. And then, famously, he travels the world trying to defend convicted or about to be convicted murderers and rapists, not very pleasant people, but who were nonetheless facing the death penalty. And Starmer has a loathing of the death penalty and a strong belief that people like that, even people like that, if you like, deserved a proper legal defence. And then when he becomes Director of Public Prosecutions, as it were, representing in some respect the British state and becoming closer to the view of the police, particularly in Northern Ireland and the army and so on, he is a man who, when he finally decides at the age of 52 to become an MP, has already been, as it were, blooded in politics.
So these are your chambers?
Yeah. Keir Starmer.
Sir Keir?
No, Keir.
Keir? Well, you don't have the sir.
I find it really clumsy, it gets in the way, I don't like it.
He has been abused ferociously by the right-wing press for what Rishi Sunak would call the lefty London lawyer side of his personality, the bleeding heart stuff, defending murderers, all of that. And yet he has also been abused by the left, by The Guardian, by other left-wing publications for instance, deciding not to prosecute the police in the Jean-Charles de Menezes case, for the Ian Tomlinson kettling case, and much else. He becomes a hate figure for the left. So by the time he gets to the House of Commons, this is somebody who has already taken on the right and the left, who is inured and accustomed to quite severe personal criticism for the decisions he has taken. He is not some kind of naive ingenue who has just wandered into politics by accident. This is somebody who has strong political views, as I say, originally based in class and in the importance of equity in the law, and who arrives having had some pretty tough experiences already.
Having spent many years having my legal arguments torn apart in court, the opportunity of making an uninterrupted speech in this chamber is too good to be true.
So what do we learn from this book about Keir Starmer once he's arrived in politics, once he's in the House of Commons? And I think the really big questions that everybody is asking is, was he ever really a supporter of Jeremy Corbyn and that style of Labour Party? Did he really want us to reverse the Brexit referendum? And as I said right at the beginning, this is the case for the defence. But what Tom Baldwin argues is that Brexit and the Corbyn leadership become for Starmer completely intertwined. You know, he is not a pro-Brexiteer by any stretch of the imagination. But, and there's some very, very telling anecdotes about his life in North London at this time, he does not go early on full frontal for the people's vote, reverse the referendum position. And he infuriates people like Alistair Campbell, Tony Blair's former spin doctor, who's very involved in people's vote, by being too timid about this. He believes all along that the idea is to get the softest, least damaging Brexit that is possible, rather than to reverse the result of the referendum.
We all have to accept and respect the referendum outcome, but we have to fight against hard Brexit.
And there's a key moment at one of the Labour conferences when he lets slip that there should be a second vote, and in that second vote, the possibility of remaining inside the EU should be present, should be available.
It's right that Parliament has the first say, but if we need to break the impasse, our options must include campaigning for a public vote, and nobody is ruling out Remain as an option.
And that is the moment when people around Corbyn, Corbyn not wanting any of this, feel that he was on manoeuvres, that he was campaigning for himself, and that he was insincere. And that's the moment, perhaps, when all these accusations, Keir Starmer, the flip-flopper, originate. And then, of course, comes the moment when Corbyn effectively falls and Starmer is standing for the leadership. And the accusation made, of course, is that he has a whole series of positions which woo the left of the party on nationalisation and tax and so on, and he drops them as soon as he gets elected. And I think in both of these stories, Baldwin mounts a pretty impressive case for the defence, basically arguing that Starmer starts from the position that Britain desperately needs a Labour government, that what the Conservatives are doing to the country is incredibly damaging and everything must be subsumed to the need to get a Labour government.
I will represent you. I will listen to you. And I will bring our party together.
On the question of did he actually want a second referendum to reverse the first referendum, I think this is much more about the processes inside the Labour Party and Starmer trying to hold together a very, very shaky alliance at the top of the Labour Party than about manoeuvres for himself. When it comes to taking those left-wing positions for a short period of time and then bit by bit moving beyond them, discarding them, of course he can argue the situation changed, the economy was different, circumstances have changed, what do you expect? But I think there is a certain bit of cynicism there. And yet, I cannot imagine any other kind of leadership which could have taken the Labour Party from the absolutely catastrophic defeat they had in the second Corbyn election right the way through to where we are today. It could not have been done by an entirely consistent leader making blazingly sincere speeches year after year after year and not changing his position. It could not have been done by somebody who represented any of the Labour factions fighting for that faction against the others. Otherwise, the Labour Party would have broken apart. Only this kind of Starmer leadership could have got Labour from where they were to where they are. And that is ultimately his defence. Show me a different way. I think we end up in a situation where we have a leader who has strong internal views. I do believe he is his own person. He knows who he is, and he is not the puppet of anybody else, though I might be wrong about that. We will see. He is somebody who believes the vast majority of British people who haven't made it into comfortable middle-class jobs deserve special attention from government. He is naturally small L liberal in his views on lots of issues around gender and class and so forth, but I don't think he's a hyper-liberal. I don't think he's somebody, to use the horrible modern parlance, who is particularly woke. If you want a genuine socialist radical prime minister who is going to transform the British economy and take on capitalism, Keir Starmer is not your man. If you want somebody who is going to champion Black Lives Matter, trans rights, Keir Starmer is not your man. If you want an absolutely brilliant, glittering, rhetorical leader who can make beautiful speeches, bring you to tears, Keir Starmer is not your man. But if you think this is a broken country and it deserves somebody who believes in the state, who has worked for the state, understands the power of the state, and who has a strong class basis to start to rebuild us, I think Keir Starmer may very well be our man. Thank you very much for watching this. Do let me know what you think. And don't forget, please, to subscribe to the New Statesman's YouTube channel.